I sat quietly at the corner table of the bustling brunch spot my family had visited every Sunday for years. The smell of coffee and pancakes filled the air, but all I could hear was my sister Sarah's laughter cutting through the noise. 35 and still figuring things out, huh? She smirked, swirling her mimosa, eyes flicking toward me. It's kind of impressive to avoid a real job this long. Everyone chuckled politely, no one daring to challenge her. I simply stirred my coffee, letting her words slide over me like water off glass. What Sarah didn't know, and what no one at that table knew, was that just last night, I approved her job application. The company she was bragging about joining, the one she called her big comeback, I co-founded it. For years, I chose the background, building, creating, growing a company without craving attention. Sarah had always been the star, the one with charm and sparkle, while I was the quiet one with potential that no one bothered to see. But the moment had come when our worlds would collide, and when Sarah would discover that the sister she once mocked was the one signing her paycheck. The Sunday brunch ritual had been part of our family for as long as I could remember. My parents, Sarah, a few uncles and aunts, all gathered at the same local cafe with its mismatched chairs, floral curtains, and the smell of maple syrup hanging in the air. I always arrived early and chose the corner seat, where I could quietly observe without being pulled into the chaos. Sarah, of course, would arrive 10 minutes late, heels clicking, phone in hand, full of stories to tell. She had always been like that, radiant, magnetic, the kind of person who walked into a room and drew every eye. "Did I tell you about the offer I got from that new fintech startup?" she announced, sliding into her seat and tossing her hair back. "Honestly, they'd be lucky to have me. Their budget is a mess." The table erupted in polite laughter. My parents beamed at her, my uncle clapped her on the back, and I kept stirring my coffee. I didn't mind. I was used to it. It hadn't always been this way. As kids, Sarah was the dancer, the performer, the golden child. I was the quiet one, who spent hours in the garage tinkering with old computers or taking apart remote-controlled cars just to see how they worked. "Emily's so patient," my mother would say. "Emily's in her own world," Dad would add with a chuckle. It wasn't meant to hurt, but over time, it built a wall between us. By the time I graduated from college, with a degree in computer science, my family barely noticed. They were too busy planning Sarah's art show or celebrating her promotion at an ad agency. I didn't resent her. Not really. But I did crave space. Space to become something without the weight of constant comparison. That's when I met Mark. He was the first person who saw past my quiet demeanor, who understood that my silence wasn't emptiness, but focus. Together, we built Data Nest in his cramped apartment, a data analytics startup that would, within 5 years, become one of the most sought-after companies in the industry. We signed major clients, secured millions in investment, and grew our team from 2 to 200. But the world only knew Mark. It was our agreement. He wanted the spotlight. I wanted freedom. My name was buried in the back-end systems, in contracts and equity papers, never in press releases or on LinkedIn profiles. Even Sarah, sitting across from me now, had no idea. That morning at brunch, as she laughed and waved her mimosa, she had no clue that the job she'd just secured, the one she thought would launch her career comeback, was at the company I built. And the application she'd submitted? It had landed on my desk, routed through an internal system I had designed myself. I remember the flicker of recognition when I saw her name on the applicant list. My stomach tightened, fingers hovering over the mouse. For a moment, I considered rejecting it, not out of spite, but out of fear. Fear that she'd walk into my carefully constructed world and shatter the balance I'd worked so hard to maintain. But I clicked approve. Because maybe, deep down, I was curious. Curious what would happen when the sister, who had always been seen, finally met the sister, who had always been invisible. Data Nest wasn't supposed to be a giant. When Mark and I first launched it, we just wanted to solve a problem: how to help companies make better decisions using their data. We worked late into the night, surviving on instant noodles and coffee, piecing together a system that could analyze patterns faster and more accurately than anything on the market. We didn't have a fancy office, just Mark's living room and a couple of battered laptops. But we had determination and each other. Mark was the face, the charmer, the pitchman. I was the architect behind the scenes, writing the code, fixing the bugs, building the framework piece by piece. 5 years later, Data Nest was valued at over $90 million. Our software was running at banks, hospitals, insurance companies. Our client list included household names, and investors lined up for a seat at the table. But if you Googled our company, you'd only see Mark's face. That was by design. I never wanted to be the one on stage. I wanted the freedom to build without the pressure of appearances, the freedom to walk into a room and not have eyes turn, the freedom to be myself. It was a trade-off I never regretted, until Sarah's name showed up in our applicant system. I stared at the screen, the familiar name flashing back at me. Sarah Green, applying for Senior Budget Analyst. Her resume was impressive, at least on paper. Years of experience in accounting, a stint at a prestigious firm, though I knew it had ended badly. She'd been laid off during a downsizing, something she never talked about, but I had quietly learned through family whispers. When I saw her application, a dozen emotions rushed through me. Amusement. Of all the companies, she had chosen mine. Anxiety. What if she found out? What if this upended the delicate balance I'd built? But most of all, curiosity. Could we work together without her knowing? Could she step into my world without recognizing the walls I'd helped build? I hit approve. In the weeks that followed, I watched from behind the curtain. Sarah breezed through the interviews, confident and polished. Our HR team was impressed. Strong communicator, ambitious, high energy, the notes read. Classic Sarah. When she was offered the position, I waited for the phone call or the celebratory text. It never came. She didn't connect the dots. She thought Mark was the boss. She assumed Emily, the quiet sister, was still figuring things out. On her first day, I stayed late in my home office, logging into the security cameras I had personally installed at headquarters. I watched as she walked through the front doors, heels clicking on the polished floors, eyes wide as she took in the space. "This place is incredible," she gushed to a colleague by the coffee machine. "I heard the founders are super low profile. No one's ever seen the second one. Probably just a silent investor." I almost laughed. She was standing in a company built with my hands, surrounded by my code, working under my leadership, and she had no idea. But I didn't feel smugness. I felt something softer, a quiet sense of satisfaction. Sarah had walked into my world, and for the first time in years, we were on the same playing field. She just didn't know it yet. Sarah hit the ground running, just as I knew she would. From the moment she stepped into Data Nest, she was a force. Her voice echoed down the hallways, her laughter filled the break room, and her opinions came fast and loud in every meeting. She was confident, polished, and charming, but beneath the surface, I could sense the pressure she put on herself. At first, she stumbled. The transition from a small accounting firm to a tech company wasn't as smooth as she expected. Our budgeting systems were more complex, the pace was faster, and the culture was nothing like the buttoned-up offices she was used to. I watched, night after night, reviewing reports from the day, reading through the meeting notes our team uploaded. There were a few rocky moments. In her first week, she overshot a project budget estimate by nearly 20%, and the department lead had to pull her aside. She was rattled, but she didn't quit. That was Sarah's strength. She didn't back down when things got hard. Slowly, I saw the shift. She started arriving early, staying late, asking thoughtful questions instead of offering snap judgments. She volunteered to help with tasks she would have considered beneath her just months before, reviewing tedious budget details, helping junior analysts with Excel issues, even brewing a fresh pot of coffee when the break room was empty. The Sarah I knew, the one who had always been the center of attention, was learning to stand back, to listen, to adapt. And from my quiet corner at home, I felt something unfamiliar stir inside me. Pride. But something else began to grow too. Suspicion. Sarah was sharp. She started noticing patterns in the company. She would glance at reports and point out the recurring name in approval fields. E. Green. She'd lean over to a coworker and murmur, Who's this mystery green who signs everything? I thought Mark was the big boss. One evening, after the office had cleared out, I logged into the back-end system to check updates and saw an alert. Internal access request from Sarah Green. She was digging, trying to understand the chain of command. I felt my pulse quicken. It was only a matter of time before she connected the dots. The next morning, Sarah walked into the accounting office early, coffee in hand, determined. She requested access to the latest quarterly budget records, claiming she needed them for a project analysis. She scanned document after document, and I knew exactly what she would find. She would see the same signature over and over, I. Green, co-founder ID 0012. I sat at my desk at home, watching the clock, waiting for the call or the text or the confrontation. But none came that day. Instead, that evening, when I checked the camera feed, I saw Sarah alone in the break room, a printout clenched in her hand, her expression somewhere between disbelief and realization. The following morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual, something I rarely did. As I walked down the hallway, I heard the familiar click of her heels. She rounded the corner and stopped dead in her tracks. "Emily?" she said, her voice tight, her brow furrowed. "Morning," I answered calmly. She blinked hard, trying to find her words. You're the co-founder?" I nodded, no smugness, no drama. "Since the beginning." Sarah let out a short, almost bitter laugh, running a hand through her hair. "I thought you were still freelancing, or doing odd jobs. I never imagined." "I know," I said softly. "That's why I didn't tell you." For the first time in years, there was no sarcasm in her voice, no cutting remark, just silence. And in that silence, something cracked open. Before she could say more, I handed her a folder. "We're launching a project, free tech workshops for underserved kids. I think you'd be a great fit to help lead the budget side." She stared at the folder, then at me. Her eyes softened, just a fraction. I didn't push. I simply walked away, giving her space to absorb the truth. It wasn't about revenge. I didn't want her to fail or to grovel. I wanted her to see me, not the version she had always believed, but the person I had quietly become. Sarah didn't speak to me for 3 days. I didn't blame her. She moved through the office like a shadow, polite but distracted, her usual charm dimmed. I caught glimpses of her in meetings, eyes flicking toward me, then away. She worked late, buried herself in spreadsheets, and for once, her laughter didn't echo through the halls. I knew that look. It was the same one I'd seen on my own face years ago when I realized the world wasn't built to hand you validation. You had to build it yourself. On the 4th morning, she knocked on my office door. I looked up from my laptop. Her shoulders were squared, but her eyes flickered with something raw. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Of course." She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. For a moment, she said nothing, just ran her hand along the edge of the desk, tracing the wood grain. "I went through every file," she began softly. "The company records, the founding documents, the contracts. I saw your name on everything." Her voice wavered, then steadied. "You built this place." I nodded once. "With Mark." She gave a dry laugh. "Of course. Mark, the face. You, the engine." She shook her head. I always thought you were the one who never figured things out. I was so wrong." There it was, the moment I had both dreaded and hoped for. "I never needed you to know," I said gently. "I just wanted the freedom to be myself." Sarah sank into the chair across from me, rubbing her temples. "You know what hurts the most? Not that you're successful. It's that I never asked. I never looked past what I thought I knew." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I reached into a drawer and pulled out the proposal folder I'd given her days before. "The project for the tech workshops. It's important to me, but we need someone strong on the numbers side, someone who can build trust with the board, the community partners, the press." Sarah looked at me sharply. "You still want me on it? After everything?" I gave a small smile. "You're good at what you do, Sarah, and people trust you. That matters." For the first time in our adult lives, Sarah was speechless. She took the folder, stood, and turned toward the door. Then she paused and looked back. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice low but clear. That afternoon, I watched from a distance as she called a team meeting, assigning tasks, laying out budget strategies, even deferring to junior analysts for input. She didn't dominate the room. She didn't need to. Something had shifted. The next few weeks were a quiet transformation. Sarah proposed a new internal mentorship program for junior employees, particularly women in tech. She suggested carving out a slice of the CSR budget for career development workshops. And when she submitted the proposal, I noticed the title on the front page: Touch the Screen, Touch the Future, inspired by the quiet mission of Emily Green. I sat at my desk, the words blurring slightly as I read them over and over. That evening, as I passed her in the hallway, she gave me a small nod, not the performative kind, but the kind that said, "I see you now." It was the most honest exchange we'd ever had. The night of the Data Nest anniversary gala, I stood in the dressing room, staring at my reflection. For years, I'd stayed behind the scenes, avoiding cameras, interviews, public events. But tonight, Mark insisted we both step into the spotlight. "It's time, Emily," he'd said with a grin. "The team deserves to meet the woman who built their world." My hands trembled slightly as I smoothed my dress. Black, simple, understated, just the way I liked it. When they called our names, the applause roared through the ballroom. Mark spoke first, telling stories about our early days, servers crashing at 2 a.m., investors laughing us out of meetings, nights spent coding and rewriting until dawn. Then he handed me the microphone. I hesitated, heart pounding. "Hi, everyone," I began quietly, voice steady. "I'm Emily Green, and I guess for many of you, this is the first time you're actually seeing me." A ripple of laughter, warm and kind. I smiled. "I've always believed that you don't have to be the loudest voice in the room to make an impact," I continued. "You just have to care deeply about the work, about the people around you, and about doing something meaningful together." As I spoke, my eyes flicked toward the back of the room. Sarah stood near the bar, one hand wrapped around a champagne flute she hadn't touched. She wasn't smiling, wasn't laughing. She was just watching. And for the first time, I felt her see me, not as the quiet little sister, not as the underachiever, but as Emily. When the ceremony ended, I slipped away before the crowd could gather. Back in my office the next day, I left a small gift on Sarah's desk: a navy leather notebook, a silver pen, and a handwritten note. "Sarah, thank you for your work at Data Nest. You're capable, resilient, and you have more to offer than you realize. I'm proud to work with you. Emily." I didn't expect a response, but a week later, during a budget meeting, I saw her pull out that notebook, flipping through pages filled with notes and ideas. On Sunday, at our usual family brunch, Sarah arrived quietly, wearing a simple blouse and jeans, her hair pulled back, no dramatic entrance. She sat beside me, her shoulders relaxed. When our uncle turned to me and chuckled, "So, Emily, still playing around with computers?" Sarah set down her coffee cup. "Uncle," she said calmly, "Emily is the smartest person I know. Without her, I wouldn't be where I am today." The table fell silent. I looked at Sarah, and for the first time, I saw her. Not the sister who had always needed the spotlight, but the woman learning how to share it. As we walked out of the cafe that afternoon, she fell into step beside me. No words, no dramatic gestures, just a quiet presence, and somehow that was enough. That afternoon, as I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the city move outside, I felt something shift inside me. For years, I had believed that staying invisible was the price of freedom, that if I kept to myself, I could avoid the complications, the disappointments, the judgments. But watching Sarah grow, watching her find her own quiet strength, I realized that sometimes the greatest freedom comes not from hiding, but from allowing yourself to be seen. Sarah never gave me a formal apology, and honestly, I never needed one. What mattered was the change, the softening in her voice, the thoughtful way she approached her work, the small, unexpected moments when she stood by my side without needing to be the center of attention. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't always a grand declaration. Sometimes it's the quiet decision to start again, to see each other with new eyes, to move forward without keeping score. We will never be the perfect sisters in a photo frame, but we are two women who have learned, in our own imperfect ways, to meet each other where we are. And for me, that's more than enough.